Good afternoon. We have now hit quorum on this very first day of classes for the spring semester. So therefore, the January 12, 2026 meeting of Faculty Senate will come to order. The minutes of the December 1st meeting are attached to this agenda for review and approval. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Next is my report. The Faculty Senate leadership team continues to meet to address a variety of WVU faculty concerns. We have been in touch with WVU committees, faculty senators, administrators, and individual faculty members on a wide variety of university-related topics, including campus climate, academic freedom, research opportunities, and research challenges, First Day Complete, and the general education curriculum. If you have any specific concern you would like us to address, please let us know. We remain ready to serve the faculty and the university at large, and will continue to work to facilitate productive conversations with the administration and provide faculty with data and other information that will help them navigate the challenges and generally become working in higher ed in 2026. Now that general part out of the way, between the last meeting and today, the hiring of the new WVU provost has been announced, starting in July. I wanted to take a minute to thank everybody who was involved in that process. From President Vinson, making sure that we had a professional open process that involved faculty, to everyone who went to all the meetings with them, people who hosted people involved in that process. Of course, obviously, the chairs of the committee, Evan Witters, and past Faculty Senate Chair Diana Davis, and all faculty members who served on the committee. I know it's an amazing amount of work for you all to do, but we now have that hire secured, and we'll be moving forward, hopefully in a continually collaborative process in the future. I would also note that interim provost Paul Kreider will remain in the position until July 1. And as recently as this morning, Paul regularly meets with Faculty Senate leadership, and I hope we can make more out of that productive relationship across the next 5.5 months, as there are obviously pressing matters that have to be dealt with before July the 1st. The Office of the Provost is still seeking volunteers to serve on the University Promotion and Tenure Advisory Panel. If you are on a department committee, a college committee, if you're part of the evaluation process generally, you cannot serve. But if you're not already part of an evaluation process, you can. And the university does need a few more volunteers for that university level panel. If you would be willing to serve, please contact Chris Staples in the Provost Office, the Executive Director for Academic Personnel. Also, HSC already has their committee in place. So sadly, HSC faculty, you all are covered, and then we'll turn everybody else to volunteer. Finally, since the Senate passed the proposed revisions to the Faculty Constitution at the last meeting in December, we will have a special university assembly either around the end of this month or the start of next month. Keep your eyes out for posts or emails about that. We're still working to find the best combination of location and time and means basically for that to be carried out in order to get the broadest possible faculty engagement in that process. That concludes my report. Do you have any questions for me? Okay, then. We will now move to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is used to handle routine and non-controversial business, allowing us to approve multiple items with one vote. Today's consent agenda includes annexes 1, 2, and 3 from the curriculum committee, which lists program changes and course changes. Are there any changes requested to the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. We will therefore then move on to our standing committee reports. I've been informed that the first 2 committee reports we usually have, we don't have because those committees have not met over winter break. So does anyone have any questions about what's going on with the General Education Foundations Committee? Okay, then we will move straight past that on the agenda as well. Just flying through it today. As far as I'm aware, Taco might have a report. Ashley, do you have a report? Because I think y'all are meeting in December. It's like,
Yeah, we haven't had our first official meeting for this semester yet, but The Blue website interface was updated, and that went through pretty seamlessly for your spot uh, reports. Everybody should have seen those come out. And then really this semester, we're just going to be focusing on increasing response rate and getting the dates out for the early semester within the next week. So that's
Okay,
it.
thanks. Any questions for Ashley? All right, then. Next up is the report from Leslie Cottrell and the Board of Governors.
Hello, everyone. Happy 2026. The Board of Governors met virtually on December 19th, so it's been a while, and I've pardon my notes. As usual, I'm going to talk about the public portions. There was some business done in the executive session that won't be included in this. The meeting included enrollment, an update on enrollment, similar to what we've heard in the Senate, which was great. It was just a December 8th update, so every week, new numbers. February seems to be the next date to keep on your radar for a grouping of numbers that Foz will share and have at his disposal. So that's great. I will also remind everyone that February also tends to be the budget discussion in general. So that on your radar. We heard great recognitions. Dr. Kreider mentioned several things, several people, and their great things that they've done, which was wonderful. And then we had a presentation from the foundation, which is always great. We don't have that every year. We haven't had that historically, so it was nice to see their role with the university as well as how they were doing, and that seemed very positive. And then, of course, the consent agenda, which is at the end, that everyone can see approvals, clearing up the slate with programs and otherwise. The next meeting will be that February meeting, and that's specifically February 20th.
Any questions for Leslie? Okay. Next up is report from the faculty representative of the state government, Jason Gross.
Okay, so today we have a special report from Travis, our government relations assistant vice president, associate vice president. And I think he agreed that if there's anything that really needs to come back, he can come back in February, maybe even via Zoom. Other than that, next week is the first meeting of the statewide advisory council of faculty. I guess with session starting this Wednesday, we're kind of, see if there's bills we want to start tracking and having some faculty input on at this point. So no other updates.
Keeping in mind, you're going to hear from Travis shortly. Any questions for Jace? Okay, thank you. Moving on to the guest reports. The first guest report goes to President Benson.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Scott. Welcome back to campus. I hope you had a great break. I know I did. Just be with my family and friends, and it was very exciting. I was very excited to come back to campus, which I think is always a good sign. I also want to welcome our new provost, Beverly Wendland. I hope some of you had a chance to meet her. She doesn't start until July the 1st, but she and her husband have a home in Oakland, Maryland, across the border. So she'll be here quite a bit, including tomorrow. So I hope you'll have a chance, if you see her on campus, go up and introduce yourself, but really excited to have her as part of our team. I want to thank Paul, too, for the continued work that he does as our interim provost. Really appreciate his vision and his commitment. We'll all be together on Wednesday, as Jason said, invited to the floor of the House for the state of the state by the governor. And then that's when the real work begins. So I've been through legislative sessions in other states, but never here. So I've heard all about it, and I'm bracing myself. Travis and I have adopted the slogan, "Must be present to win." So we're going to be up there a lot. And I think it's really important for us to be visible. I mean, we're in effect the chief advocates for the university during this session. So really appreciate Travis and Dan, Danielle, our entire team, all of whom are much more familiar with the kind of the inner workings of the state than I, but I think I hope I'll learn quickly. I'll let Travis talk about our priorities, but you've heard about it: deferred maintenance, HVAC in the Coliseum, and expansion of our medical school class size and the required space that really is necessary. So I'll let Travis focus in on that. State support is important, but the margins really are increased with donor support. Leslie mentioned the foundation report to our board, which was very well received. But in the next 2 weeks, I'll be going to both coasts of Florida, east and west, to see a lot of the West Virginians that make their way down there this time of year, all of whom are very supportive of what's going on. And we will be announcing pretty shortly our kind of official launch of our campaign. And I won't reveal a number, but if you would ask anybody 10, 12 years ago, would West Virginia University do $1 billion plus fundraising campaign, and would they reach that goal? I think everybody probably would have looked at you a little sideways. But it's happened. We've exceeded that initial goal, and you'll hear more about the details of how much we've raised and where it's going in the next little while. We've also had a chance this last week to go with members of our team to Arizona State University. You've heard me talk about them, one of the newest members of the AAU. Michael Crow is a friend. I've known him a long time, and there are things they can do as a urban campus with a ton of land and a lot of private industry that we just don't have here. But still in all, we wanted to see if there's some things we can mimic. And also, they are starting a medical school, so they had a lot of questions for us. Last year, the HERD data just came out, and they did $1 billion in research without a medical school. So imagine what they'll be able to ramp up now. But really, I think, a very informative visit, and we look forward to collaborations with them. You'll hear more about this next one, and then I want to turn some time over to Leslie if she'll come up here while I'm saying this. We hosted President John Daniels and the Dean of the Medical School, Dean of Public Health, Dean of Nursing, their Vice President for Research on campus from Johns Hopkins in mid-December. This was at their request. We are going to partner with them and do some, I think, really interesting things, and they're backing it up with quite a bit of private support. So you'll hear more details about that, but they want to learn from us, and we certainly want to learn from them. But it was a very productive exchange for an entire day. You all know Leslie Miel from Health Sciences. She and I have done 18 now public kind of presentations to different groups. Most recently, right before the Christmas break, the holiday break, we did a report to the staff Senate, beg your pardon, to the staff over in the mountain lair. It was very well attended. We want to do that same presentation today, maybe a little more compacted because we have a lot of reports, Mr. Chair, I know. But we wanted to demonstrate that we meant what we said when we said we wanted your feedback, because we've incorporated that feedback into some changes into our strategic compass, to the pillars, to some of the language that we're using. And I want Leslie to kind of go through that in some detail today. I'm happy at this point, if it's appropriate, to take questions and then turn over to Leslie, or we can do it at the end. Yeah, happy to take any questions you might have. Oh, here we go.
Hi, Brian Powell, Statler College. I noticed with with fall enrollment numbers came out that it looks like things are stabilizing. It appears that the system was up, I think, about 50 students, and in Morgantown we dropped about 110 from the previous year. Kind of wondering, as you're starting to put together the budget for the coming fiscal year, what sort of expectations are being factored into around enrollment for that?
You're exactly right. We did have some stabilization. Last semester was our biggest freshman class since 2022. Foz, I had him over for dinner the other night. We watched football together on Friday night, and he told me our applications are up 15% point in time compared to last year. We did have some challenges with our IT system, and I think you may have heard about some of that in terms of the switch over to Salesforce and some of the data kind of getting stagnated. And so some of our acceptance letters were delayed, and that had a kind of pejorative impact on getting people notified. Foz sent an update today, and that number between how much we were down to what we're down now went down almost 30 percentage points. So I'm very happy with where we are, and the fact that housing opens next week for deposits. I think you'll see more of a positive trend. So as it relates to our budget presentation, I mean, we kind of budget on a certain number. I would argue our probably ideal sweet spot for a freshman class this year, we were just shy of 4,500. I think we really can get a little bit higher than that, but the key is retaining that freshman class all 4 years. And the number I really want to celebrate is our retention number, which was 85.1%, our highest ever fall to fall. So those are all key metrics that we really pay close attention to, but it's all trending in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Eugenia Pena, Davis College. So I'm just curious about one thing related to the donors. We know that they are very important. In your new position, have you noticed if we are going to the old donors, are we receiving new donors? Because I think that's a change that may be happening now. Thank you.
Well, if you pay attention to kind of transfer of wealth in our country, they're saying it's, trillions of dollars, probably the biggest in our history of America. So the key is to certainly take care of the donors that have been there for us for a long time, but also kind of nurture and bring up that new generation of donors. So I'm thinking of some newer ones that we've just kind of brought into the fold that are in their mid to late 30s. Those are the kind that you get their families involved and you get them excited about what the university is doing. And I think that bodes very well for the future. I will tell you one thing, we're really working hard with the foundation is, and you'll hear more about this from FOZ here in the next little while and also from the foundation. But when a donor sometimes gives a scholarship and it's encumbered with certain specifications, and you cannot find a student that fits all those specifications or criteria, that scholarship goes unused. So that's an issue for colleges. It's an issue for departments. One of our tasks is to go back into those agreements, go back to the original donor and see how we might be able to tweak those agreements so that those scholarship dollars do not go unused. It's not that they're just sitting there. They certainly accrue interest. They're part of our corpus of our endowment. But that's another key factor is to make sure we're taking advantage of all the funds that are given to us. So you'll hear more about that as well. I know the Steelers are playing tonight. I see a Steelers sweatshirt over there. There we go. All right. I will turn it over to Leslie, and then we're happy to take questions together. So, Leslie.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. For those that don't know me, my name's Leslie Miel. I'm the other Leslie at Health Sciences. I've been at Health Sciences, between Health Sciences and WVU hospitals for probably close to 25 years. And they don't let me out very often, and only if I promise to behave, they let me get out into the rest of the university. So it's my pleasure to be with you. I was fortunate enough to, I've always done planning over my career, and I've been fortunate enough to help facilitate the beginning of the planning process at the university. And for those that know me, I like to see the beginning because the planning process should be ongoing. It really shouldn't have a start and stop. It's something that we continually have to do. So versus back in the day where we would say, oh, we'll do a 5-year planning process, 10-year planning process. And then once it's done, we kind of stop and everybody goes off and does something different than probably what the plan says. The goal really is to turn this into an activity that actually drives change within the university. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is sort of where we're at with the planning process. And I want to go over the feedback that we got on the strategic compass. So with that said, I just want to take a quick poll. Like President Benson said, we have done over 18 presentations to all units and colleges across campus. So I just want to see a show of hands of those that were able to attend. And don't be embarrassed if you couldn't have attended. Okay, great. It just gives me some feel for what background everybody has. So, like I talked about at that particular session, that when we look at planning, we look at planning really in two phases. One is where we set some overarching strategic goals for the university. And the second phase, which again is an ongoing phase, is how do we implement things and what do we do to drive that change towards achieving those goals within the institution? So this journey really even started prior to the spring of 2025. Actually, probably about 12 months prior to that, I was able to do some work with the university leadership team, which included the deans and senior leadership. And we went through an exercise where we started to identify, just high level goals within the institution. We were able to use that information that was done at that time as a springboard for when President Benson, even before President Benson started, to come up with kind of jump starting the process to create sort of an overarching framework. So really by June of 2025, we developed a strategic, what I call framework for planning. In August, we held a planning retreat for the Board of Governors. I believe it was the first planning retreat for the Board of Governors. And they were able to give input on really sort of measures of success based on the goals that we had shown them. Then in August, sort of the end of August to October, President Benson and I did 18 presentations to different units that talked about this overarching framework, the pillars and the relative goals under each one of those pillars. I begged at those meetings for everybody to please, please, please complete the survey, give us your feedback. After multiple sessions, I had people come up to me and say, hey, you know what? It's great. We like the fact that we're doing the survey. We want every voice to be heard. But what happens after we take that survey? We're used to doing these kind of pulse surveys, but we really don't know what happens once that information is provided. So what was really important to President Benson is that when we ask for feedback, we're going to show how we're going to use that feedback. And so the remaining portion of this presentation is going to be talking about how the comments and the results of the survey informed the strategic compass and made it a much better, I believe, document. So this again is the overarching planning framework. You can see we have 5 vertical strategic priorities, which is education, discovery, health, service, and experiences. We have an overarching mission statement. We have guiding principles. And I do want to say when we presented to the staff, the question was asked, do these guiding principles kind of do away with the values or Mountaineer values? And they don't. The Mountaineer values I look at as those are sort of core beliefs. These guiding principles are more like the way we operate whenever we go to implement strategies within these strategic priorities. And lastly, we have foundational elements, which are really the horizontal threads of people and culture, finance, core infrastructure, and institutional reputation, which really serve as a foundation for all the work that we do really in those vertical pillars. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over, let me just go back if I can, maybe not. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to go through each one of those elements and I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to give you sort of on the next slide, sort of the overarching framework for this entire presentation. I want to get through this quickly. So I'm not going to review everything, but I'm going to talk to you about how it's structured. So we had a total of 920 people that identified, that started the survey. What was really clear is as they went through the survey, those responses dropped. And I'm going to show you for each question what the response rate was. So, but what was clear is as surveys came in, so as we did presentations and as surveys came in, I watched as the surveys came in. And the one thing that was very clear is there was a lot of consistency in responses, not only to kind of the Likert scale questions, but also with the comments. It didn't matter what group we presented to, it was very consistent. So I'm going to move on from there. And again, like everyone knows in a survey, one of the most valuable things are the comments. And I can tell you, President Benson, there were over 1,300 comments, very thoughtful comments. President Benson read them all, and I read them 3 times because I read them as they came in. I read them for a second time. And then just so you know, what I did is when I reviewed them, I then lumped them into thematic areas, because the one thing you want to be really careful is we had actually pretty positive responses to each one of these elements. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to change something and then have half the people that liked it not like it. So we had to be really methodical and thoughtful about the changes we made. That's why we wanted to make sure we solved themes before we made changes, to make sure, you know, it was more than one person that was seeing something that perhaps we didn't see. So for the mission statement, so all of these elements are going to sort of look the same. So I'm going to talk to you about what the initial statement is. We're going to look at the survey results. I'm going to tell you what the thematic areas are, and then we're going to review the revisions. So this is the initial mission statement. And again, I'm not going to read it. You can read it. And then you can see from a response rate perspective, we had 71% that I would consider supportive. We had 19.5 somewhat supportive and 9.5 that were not supportive. So with that said, in the comment section, this is what we heard. So when we looked at and we lumped these into categories, and actually the table I have is like 10 pages long of this. I tried to summarize it. You can see the supportive comments and the areas of concern. So the areas of concern we really wanted to make sure we addressed is the biggest one. And again, you look at these comments and you think like, what were we thinking? Why didn't we come up with this? Was the use of the word land grant. I mean, there was no mention of land grant in the draft mission statement. And the other one is there was no mention of how we serve others. So those were 2 key components that were glaring in the comment section that we said, okay, we've got to bake those in because they're so core to who we are. So what you're going to see is this is the revised statement. This looks a little bit different than the other ones I'm going to show you. But what we actually did is at the beginning, we sort of bookended with bold futures kind of start here. We removed the one at the beginning. Someone had commented that it was redundant and we're making the statement longer than we wanted. So we took that off. And as you can see, we added in our land grant mission. So at WVU, pride in our land grant mission runs deep, success is earned, and life-changing experiences prepare mountaineers to serve others and lead in West Virginia and the world. Your bold future starts here. Let's go. So again, those 2 were key things. We heard loud and clear from the feedback on the survey, and those were the adjustments that were made. Under guiding principles, and again, I'm not going to, you can see the survey responses, and to make this a little bit quicker, I'm not going to review those, but you know, this was the initial guiding principle statement. You can see the responses, again, very positive responses. I feel after doing this for quite some time. This one, the most glaring thing was, and I'm sure everybody in this room will shake their head, is the use of the word outwork. That was something that people felt like, look, you're focusing on the process and not the outcome. So why are we using outwork? So revisions to this included, we removed the word outwork and we just have the word outperform, which is more focused on outcome versus process. And under empower through education, there was some redundant language with transforming lives. And so we shortened that based on some comments that were received. Okay, so for the rest of these, you're going to see I have them edited a little bit different. So for education, so again, very positive responses, 90% supportive. These were the initial goals that were provided. This was the feedback that was received. And I think the biggest takeaway for this one was the very first goal. And I'm going to just give you a second to look at these, and then I'm going to move to the next slide. So in the original version, we used the word relevant. And I think some people from reading the comments felt like it was code for anything other than, uh, English literature or history, or it was some kind of, I'm an English literature major, our president's a historian. So it wasn't code for that, but I appreciate that, that take on that. So we removed that because it also is probably not necessarily to have in there. The other thing that was key about that statement is the focus initially was really on, it sounded like getting a job, which we all know higher education is more than just getting a job. So the language was changed to offer academic programs that broaden the mind, foster personal growth, and prepare learners for meaningful careers of today and in the future. And the way you're going to see this is everything in white was part of the original statement. Everything in gold is new language, and the red are actually, we struck out language. Again, the second goal, the intent of the second goal was around non-traditional learners. How do we create those pathways that anybody that wants to learn can get into the system? So again, based on a comment, we adjusted the language to just try to make that a little bit clearer, as well as the focus on learner success. And then again, we got really good feedback on the flow of the goals and how they should follow in some kind of logical pattern. So again, you're going to see for most of these, we adjusted the way the goal order, so it would flow a little bit better. Under discovery, this one is, again, 92% of people were supportive. And I will tell you, the feedback for this one was much more focused on how are we going to do this versus goal language. Sorry, it's a little bit of delay. So again, you can take a look at this. Again, it's more focused on, hey, this all sounds great, but do we have the resources? Do we have the capabilities to do the goals that are actually listed here? So there were only some minor revisions that were made to this one. Again, there was a comment, who defines the toughest? So why do we say toughest? Why don't we just say tough problems? And then a comment was really good about our connection. Look, we can take problems from the heart of Appalachia to other rural communities across the globe. So rural was added. And then there were actually a couple comments that talked about the difference between critical and analytical thinkers and why both are important. So that adjustment was made. And then there were also, again, really good edits that people made. The fact that we already used addressed or tackle at the top goal. So why don't we use address? And we use drive in the second goal. So use a different word. So again, just so it flows better and sounds better were the adjustments that were made. The health goal is the one that actually had the most changes. Again, 90% were supportive. So again, there's this balance of, okay, you want to make changes, but you also want to make sure that you don't lose the people that were supportive of the goals. So again, you can see the comments here. I think a lot of people really want to make sure, and again, I'm from health sciences, and I can tell you this goal is not just health sciences. This goal is anybody across campus that contributes to the health and well-being of West Virginians. So we want to make sure that that's really clear. Also, the focus not just on sick care for people, but how do we keep people well and how do we improve people's quality of life, I think is some of the things that really came out of the comments. So again, everything in white was the original. So you can see there's quite a few changes here. Everything from saying eliminate, which is pretty much probably next to impossible to do, to change that to address. Really the focus on wellness and prevention versus sick care. The changing of the goals. We had, I think, the one that talked about delivering healthcare closer to the top. That one was moved to the bottom because again, it's probably, you want to keep people well. Going for sick care is sort of like the last resort, right? We want to do all these other things. If all else fails, we want to make sure we deliver world-class care. One of the most significant ones was we had cultivate exceptional health professionals who meet workforce demands. That was the original statement, which again, that's not who we are. So the suggestion was, what about compassion? What about empathy and care? So now it reads cultivate exceptional health professionals who embody compassion, empathy, and the spirit of collaboration and a shared commitment to healing. I'm so sorry. I keep hitting this thing. Okay. Under service, again, 92% of people were supportive of the statements that were here. Again, there, some of the concern was, the mention of engagement and volunteerism. I think people know, like, I personally think this is one of our biggest differentiators at WVU. So for this one, again, just to be consistent, we used learners everywhere else. We changed students to learners. For the third goal, we had accelerate time to degree. And there were several comments that basically said, look, our goal is to have people graduate, not how fast they necessarily graduate, which is very true. So that was adjusted. Then the last one was just the nuance between bringing businesses and attracting businesses to the region. And there were a couple of really good comments that were, look, yes, we want to bring businesses to the region, but the businesses we bring, we want to make sure they're good for West Virginia. Like, we can bring businesses in that aren't good for the state. So we just don't want to blanketly say, oh yes, come all. Like, what are you going to bring to West Virginia, and how are you going to benefit the state? So again, I thought that was a powerful change. I don't know what to do with. Okay, I'm just going to do the page down. Okay, so under experiences, this had an 86.6% response rate. And you can see, again, the number of responses. And you could see the supportive and the concern. I will tell you, I mean, what was, other than the outwork, this concern was probably the biggest. It was the focus on student athletes on one of the goals. And we're going to talk about that one in a minute. That was one of the biggest comments or themes. So for this one, again, reordered some based on a more logical flow. Under the second one, really removed that language because it was redundant with the overall strategic priority statement, which is about experiences. Again, using the word enrich instead of improve, since we've already used the word improve. Preparing students to lead an interconnected world, just adding how we would do that through global experiences and cross-disciplinary engagement. The biggest change was to the last goal, which was completely rewritten. And it's focused now on competitive programs. And competitive programs could be robotics. It's not necessarily just what we would traditionally think of as athletics. And really, it goes to the power of having these programs, what it does to build community and also elevate the university as a whole. So again, that one, and that language, really came from reading the comments as well as some discussions with faculty. The next section are really those horizontal elements, and they were called strategy enablers, but the suggestion was these are foundations. And there was just a little bit of a negative connotation to the word enable. So we changed it to foundations. And as you can see, 89% were supportive. And again, when you look at the comments aren't about the wording of these, elements. What am I doing? On again. They're really focused on sort of where we're at today and how are we going to change things moving forward. So yeah, again, I think people understand that we need to modernize technology. We need to be a people-first culture, but how are we going to get moving? How are we going to move in those directions is really what the comments were. So for this one, I mean, very minor changes. We changed it from strategy enablers to foundation. We adjusted. The finance was at the top. And again, it was not in any particular order, but we moved people and culture to the top because again, that's the most important thing as a university. So those were the things that were changed for that one. Under general comments, I mean, you can see people were just appreciative of us starting a process for the organization to have some shared goals that we can understand and kind of get behind. You know, there were concerns about follow through, the fact that we do have lower morale. How are we going to change things? We have limitations on resources. People feel like they want to be listened to. Everybody wants to be listened to, right? Like you want to feel heard. And so, you know, part of us coming back here today is to say, you know, we hear you. I will say whenever I was talking to the staff, there was, I don't know why this one comment like really stood out to me, but it was a pretty detailed comment. At the end, this person reveals that they have been here for 30 some plus years. And they said, I don't know why I'm bothering even giving this comment because no one's going to read it anyway. And I just want to say that that's not true, that your comments are taken seriously. We want people to be engaged. And our hope is, you know, that the next time we see a higher survey response and the next time an even higher one, because people know that their voices are heard. Obviously, the survey is not the only way we're going to get input from people, but it is one mechanism, I think, that sort of levels the playing field that allows everybody, whether you have a loud voice or small, you know, soft voice, to actually be heard. And and so for next steps, just really quickly, we have charged people to lead each one of these kind of pillars from an institutional level. Their goal is really twofold. One, to develop, you know, a handful of what I call strategic indicators, and it's how would we measure success for each one of these pillars? And the second thing is to identify some institutional level projects or initiatives that we can put in place over the next 12 to 18 months that will help us move collectively to achieving these goals. So just very generally, you know, that those teams started working in November. Each of those pillars has a group of people that are working on this institutional level type action. Then that information will get cascaded to college and units to develop a similar measurement plan and implementation plan. And then in the spring, we're going to launch a grassroots seed funding mechanism where any faculty and staff, if you have a good idea that relates to the goals within the plan, you'll be able to submit that idea for funding. I will say, you know, like I know when people see these groups being formed, it's like, oh my God, like I'm not on this group. And I just want to stand here today, say, this is your invitation. This is your formal invitation. If you are a faculty, staff, student, alumni, external stakeholder, and you want to participate in the planning process, this is your invitation to plan. You don't have to serve on one of these groups to be able to be an active engager in planning. You can look at the goals that are there, sit with your team, talk to your unit leader about ideas that you have to move us forward on these goals. While the strategic compass sets a kind of collective direction, it's only going to come alive by the creativity, the ideas, and the daily contributions of everybody on campus. So again, I just ask you to look at this. I mean, I just heard that we're going to be developing a website that's going to have the goals and information on it. So I just hope everybody looks at this and sees, you know, how they can connect or start thinking about how they can connect and contribute to some of the goals that we talked about today. So with that said, I would just like to thank everybody that did take the survey. It's greatly appreciated. We can't act on things that we don't know. And I look forward to kind of what comes out of this and the momentum that it builds across campus. So with that said, I'm sure President Benson and I can take any questions.
Hello, Ron Reeser, Statler College. I was at one of the original presentations you did, and I'm actually very thankful that you revised some of the language based on the feedback that we submitted on the survey. I know a lot of the things that you updated were concerns that I and my colleagues had, so it looks a lot better. I was wondering, you plan to do a follow-up survey to measure faculty opinion on the revised version versus the original?
That's a good question. I think that, I don't know if we'll do that. Like, I don't know if we'll do that. Like, it was such a strong response that I feel like that we really looked at what the concerns were, and I feel like we answered them. So I feel like we can keep going round and round, or we can jump into action. And I just want to say this too, like, typical planning process is every 5 to 10 years, right? Like, so if it's not perfect, we're stuck with it for 5 to 10 years. There is no one saying that if after 6 months or a year, we want to tweak something on this, we could tweak it, So maybe instead of doing it immediately, maybe we see how this unfolds over the next 12 to 18 months and then do it then saying, hey, look, like these were our goals. What do you think? Do you think something needs modified based on, the world's so dynamic? I want to use the word dynamic and not crazy. The world's so dynamic that, we need to be able to kind of flow with it. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think that makes sense to wait for some time to elapse and then to ask for follow-up.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
that.
you. Thanks.
Megan Lake, College of Creative Arts and Media. I wondered if you can talk to us a little bit more about the seed grant kind of concept and what you're looking for in terms of feedback that their faculty could give, or kind of maybe partners across the university and different college campus kind of departments. What might be an example of something you'd want to hear about?
Okay, so it's at its infancy.
Okay.
And so I would say, okay, so look at each one of those pillars, and there's goals under each one of the pillars. I think what we're really envisioning when we talked about the seed funding mechanism is, we want to be able to, there are certain things that you want to see happen, right? Like, we want people to get out of their colleges and units and work across campus. We want to see things that are very impactful. So I would envision, like an open call that would go out, and it would basically say, hey, look, if you have ideas of projects or, initiatives that support one or more of the goals within this sort of strategic compass, you need to submit a 1 or 2 pager talking about what that is. And I think there'll be a scoring rubric that will look at, is it interprofessional? What kind of impact is it going to have? And, I don't know exactly yet how we're going to go about like looking at them, but hopefully it will be kind of maybe of a peer reviewed process potentially. And then, depending on how much money that we can get in this kind of pool of cash, then give out awards based on that. With the understanding then there needs to be a report back after that that says, hey, this is what we said we were going to do, and this is what's happening, and this is the impact that it actually had.
Good. Incidentally, I just had a conversation with my colleague in interior architecture, and she was actually talking about ASU and the things that they're doing on campus that promote actually more like sober activities around, I think, campus culture, campus life, and what those initiatives might look like. And so she's got a capstone student actually researching this, and I literally told her to send this to your email, President Benson, in May when it's finished. So in my mind, that might be an example of what kind of an initiative could happen on campus and
Absolutely.
might promote
Yes.
really healthy kind of campus culture.
Yes.
So, okay. Thank you.
Sure. So yeah, when you look at sort of initiatives, they come in a bunch of different directions, right? Like, we'll have institutional ones, we'll have ones that come from schools, we'll have ones that come from individuals, and it's all of this collective action hopefully will come together and kind of what's going to lift the university.
Hi, Mandy Wyrick from Eberly School of Social Work. Just to kind of build on her question, actually, when you say seed funding, are you saying something new and never been done before, or actually where we've actually been kind of stunted in growth the last couple of years, maybe this would give us an opportunity to actually flourish programs we've been trying to get off the ground.
You know, like I said, okay, so this, we're going to launch this, and I think maybe one of the things that might be good is to engage some faculty to talk about, like, what do we want this to look like, right? I personally think it should be, you know, it doesn't have to be something new or fancy. It could be something that, like, okay, we need to do this one minor tweak in something, and it's going to make a huge difference. Or I just, you know, I've been working on something. I need a small amount of money that's going to get me over this huge hill. And then there's going to be, like, you know, this tremendous outcome. That's just my personal opinion. Like, I think that it could be either.
Hi, Joe Jones, College of Creative Arts and Media. First, I just want to say, Leslie, thank you for your service to the university. I think this is a good lesson for all of us that when we tap our actual expertise in the university, we don't need to go to outside consultants. I'm glad we didn't have to do that. President Benson, I know we started this before you got here, but maybe you'll get a little credit for that. We don't need consultants all the time. Anyway, a quick question though about maybe how this is actually being driven. So I appreciate that you gave this survey and you got our feedback and you changed all this language. Where does the Board of Governors sit in this whole conversation? If only because we say things like take out athletics and don't emphasize it so much, and then they go ahead and pass a resolution saying the academic side is going to give athletics money or something like that. So that doesn't align with our strategic plan. So where does the Board of Governors actually come into this conversation about this plan?
That is above my pay grade.
That is a very germane question. And if you'll remember, when we first kind of broached some of the ideas back in the early summer, the board said, hey, we want to get together, and Leslie referenced the first ever kind of strategic retreat. So we took those ideas to them. They then gave us their input, and we incorporated into the things that we then rolled out to campus. So it's kind of already baked in. And I want to emphasize that everywhere I go, I tell folks, look, we are a university. Okay, we're about academics. I love beating Iowa State like we did yesterday or Kansas the day before. But at day's end, we're about producing college graduates. So the board has heard that. They don't see an either or. They certainly are very vocal, as Scott and Leslie can attest, to where they want to kind of land athletically. But what they gave us has been incorporated and fine-tuned already in the plan.
And I'm totally asking this in good faith. Is this some kind of agreement now that you can point to this and say, look, this is what we've agreed upon, and maybe offer pushback if they do try to push the university in a direction that you're not comfortable?
No, I think that's very well stated. I think it encapsulates what we're trying to do, because it's one thing to go through this whole thing with our homegrown talent and then sit on put on a shelf. This, we hope, will guide everything that we do, decide budgetarily what we do in terms of strategy and what we focus on in the programs we want to develop. So yes, that's a very pertinent question, and I hope I answered it properly.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Hi there, Catherine Fonseca, WVU Libraries. This question might be more for Leslie. Again, thank you for sort of closing the loop. I really appreciate transparency around the changes. Related to the question about soliciting feedback on the changes, I guess I'm really supportive of all the changes. There was one change I was hoping that you could clarify a little further. It was under the health pillar, and it was the elimination of evidence-based practice. And I guess I'm just wondering why that changed, especially if we're moving towards AAU model and, you know, kind of bridging that research gap and that practitioner gap. To me, it felt like a real loss, the elimination of that phrasing.
Yeah, and so there were multiple comments that said that that was sort of like an obvious thing, you know, that why are we calling that out of all things that we're calling out was the comments.
So the phrasing of evidence-based practice, they thought it was
like
obvious.
it was
Okay.
obvious, like
Interesting.
obviously that we would do that. That's the comments. That's not
Okay.
me. That's the comments.
Okay.
I'm the one that we added it in,
Sure,
but
sure.
you know.
No, thanks. Thank you for clarifying that change.
Yeah, sure.
Lisa Costello, School of Medicine. Just a follow-up of that, and perhaps this goes to your comment as things have changed even just last week. What would be evidenced is no longer supported by or recommended by, I'm speaking as a pediatrician.
Yeah.
So we may want to reconsider that just given some of the recent changes historically and how we can be leaders in academia to follow the evidence, even if government agencies may choose not to.
Okay, yeah, so that's a really good point because, you know, that survey was taken in October. You know, maybe those comments wouldn't have been made if the survey was taken now. I don't know. Other thoughts? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, don't worry. Thank you for the work. Really good. I mean, the only question I have is in the next steps. So we have the group of already organized of the leadership assignments. And then one word that kept with me is the cascade. So when things are coming from up down, in management or planning, we always have the monitoring. That means we go back. So is it that the people that in the schools that are going to receive just the comments that were made, or we're going to be able to have an opinion on the comments that we're going to be cascading down?
No, absolutely. So whenever I say cascade, it's really just looking at those overarching goals. Like units within the university will have their opportunity to say, okay, these are the goals, right? We did a survey, we've got 90% support, which is probably, you know, about the best we're ever going to get. But how are we individually as a college, as a department, as a unit, as an individual, what are we going to do to help make this happen? That will be under the purview of your college or under your unit. You can also look at that and say, hey, look, you know, these goals, these are great. Out of all of the 25 goals that are listed, you know, we really support, I don't know, 10 of the goals. And those are the 10 we're going to focus on. And you know what? There might be a goal that we want to have that's not listed under here that we want to add. That is under your purview. We're just saying, if we created goals as a university and didn't say, hey, there's goals for everybody, we'll never go anywhere. Like we have to have some shared goals, but that does not mean you can't have goals within your unit that are unit specific.
Okay,
does that make sense?
Yeah, well, that was important because I think that when there's a group and we know about that, the group has an opinion and sometimes the group itself becomes an opinion.
Yeah.
But then they kind of, it gets closed. So when they look outside, we have other point of view. And
Yeah.
so it's not carved in stone, it's flexible.
Yes.
And okay, that's
If
important.
you take away anything, like this process has to be flexible. And it has to be nimble. I mean, we cannot go back to like we do a plan every 5 years and we're stuck with it because no one wants to change it or we don't use it at all because it's so silly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda is Interim Provost Paul Kreider.
Good afternoon. Welcome back, everyone, and Happy New Year. Let's make 26 a heck of a lot better than 25. We continue our efforts to fill vital administrative roles at the university thanks to the hard work of our search committees at the dean's level. The library dean's recruitment is underway, and the committee is scheduled to review applications later this week. Candidates are anticipated to visit campus in early February. Those dates are now tentatively set for the 2nd through the 6th of February. The Eberly College search the position profile is available at the Greenwood Asher and Associates website, and candidates are anticipated to visit campus in early March. We are in ongoing discussions with the search committee for the College of Law dean position, and we will keep you posted on next steps regarding that search as soon as possible. And let me just answer this question before it's asked, that yes, incoming Provost Beverly Windland will have some say in these hires. Another search that will also benefit our faculty directly is wrapped up already, and that is the new position for Director of Digital Accessibility.
This position will report to the Office of Student Accommodations and oversee efforts in helping to ensure digital materials are fully accessible. Some of you may remember Erin Kelly from the former Teaching and Learning Commons. She has been accepted and just recently started in that new capacity as the Director of Digital Accessibility. So there are meetings on the books for later this week. They're going to map out processes, and we will share more details and next steps very soon. For those of you that use Turnitin for your student assignment submissions, you may notice a new option is available. We recently launched a 6-month subscription with Turnitin for a trial for their AI detection module. The option went live on January 1st, and there will be some campus training provided very soon. However, adding AI detection to a Turnitin assignment is intuitive. The tool reminds faculty that the detector is not definitive and only that is flagged some suspicious behavior. False positives and false negatives are possible, and faculty are encouraged to use this just as an additional resource in efforts to ensure academic integrity. First generation mentoring. I mentioned back in September of the West Virginia HEPC grant awarded to a group of WVU researchers who are addressing critical challenges in recruiting, retaining, and supporting the success of first generation college students. Some of you may have applied to be a first generation faculty champion, and we thank you for that. Now this team is seeking first and second year first generation college students to connect, learn, and thrive through this mentorship program. First gen students will be paired with a third or fourth year student or faculty member who is also a first generation student and who has walked the path that they're now in. At this time, the program is limited, to students on the Morgantown campus. The program is designed for students who generally want to be mentored and who are ready to engage. If you know of a first generation student who would benefit from this mentoring, encourage them to apply, and that is by January 14th. You can find a link to the form in a January 6th e-news story or contact Michelle Richards-Babb in the chemistry department. I mentioned before that there's a WVU Scholarly Teaching Conference that's offered by the Teaching and Learning Center and the Office of the Provost, and that is May 13 through 14. As a reminder, the call for proposals deadline is January 31st and is open to faculty, instructors, staff, and students across all WVU campuses. The center is also hosting another round of virtual info sessions about the proposal submission process. I wanted to give you some reminders also about the undergraduate research. We'll accept nominations for the Travis Steimling Award for mentoring undergraduate students in research, and that application deadline is January 18. Details are available on the website. And at the graduate level, there's the 3-minute thesis competition, accepting applications through February 8. The Distinction in Mentoring Graduate Students in Research Award remains open for nominations from students until January 30th. And nominations for the Office of Graduate Education and Life's Fellowships for Graduate and Professional Students closes on January 26th. Details for those 3 things will be found on the Graduate and Life website. So that is my report. Are there any questions for me today? Yes, ma'am.
Hi there, Catherine Fonseca, WVU Libraries. I was a little disappointed to hear about the pilot for the Turnitin add-on. I don't think we can ed tech our way out of this. I guess what's the plan for assessing the pilot, especially knowing that these AI detectors have a really high error rate?
That's a good question. And Evan, do you have an answer to that question? He's been working with Paul Headings on this.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for the question as well. They claim a 99% success rate. A little dubious, so that's why it's a pilot. We're gonna try it. Basically, it's an automatic option if you do a Turnitin assignment. It's already there. You'll see it in your originality report when you run that. You can click on the AI box. It works just like the regular originality report. It'll highlight the text that it feels like came from AI. Tried it a couple times myself. It seemed to work, but I can't speak to its continued ability to be 100% accurate. So we just want people to be cautious, use it, provide me with any feedback you have on how it's working, how the assignment works. But obviously, there's a lot of demand to do something. Honestly, the reason we didn't originally have that option was because it did not work very well. But they do claim they've made substantial improvements. It's being used by a lot of other institutions. So we're hoping it'll give faculty a tool to be able to at least evaluate papers and get a sense for whether AI might have been involved either in summarizing text or actually providing text all on its own. Thanks.
No other questions? Okay, let's make it a great semester. Happy New Year.
Next up, we have a report from Associate Vice President Travis Mollahan tied to the upcoming legislative session.
Good afternoon. The state legislative session begins this Wednesday, so just in a couple days, and runs for 60 days until March 14th. Our team will be on the ground in Charleston for the entirety of that session. As President Benson said, he'll be joining us for several days at the Capitol, but in particular on Wednesday. I think we're also having our new provost come and visit the Capitol as well to introduce her. During the president's report to you earlier today and during the December Board of Governors meeting, we talked about several funding opportunities that we're presenting to the legislature. I just want to stress that these are options. We're not asking for all of these to be funded. We're just giving the legislature and the governor a range of opportunities to invest in the university so we can move forward strategically and financially. Depending on what we learn during the session, we could change our requests or we could adapt them to fit into other funding measures. So I just wanted to preface that before sharing. As the president said, we have outlined 3 opportunities that we think the state could be very helpful with. First is deferred maintenance. And we have significant deferred maintenance issues on all 3 campuses, as do all higher education institutions in the state. A few years ago, the state allocated about $200 million, and WVU received about $50 million of that funding. It helped fix roofs, sidewalks, HVAC systems, elevators, et cetera, across our system. And we think that another investment in deferred maintenance would be helpful to us. It would also be helpful to the other institutions of higher education. Second option is expansion of the medical school. Dr. Marsh and Leslie are conducting a feasibility study of what that would look like. And so we'll have more details to share as we conduct that research and approach the state for specifics. And then finally, we talked about some improvements that could be made to the HVAC system at the Coliseum, as well as the access ramp, which would allow us to use that venue year-round for concerts, for other things that would benefit not just the university from a revenue-generating perspective, but the community and the region. We're also working with Potomac State to make them a permanent member in the Learn and Earn program. They were given pilot status about 3 years ago, and that program expires at the end of this academic year. So we're going to work with the legislature to pass that bill. And we are working with WVU Tech to identify a project or policy which would benefit them during this upcoming session. There are always other priorities that pop up. There are thousands of bills introduced. In particular, the state was awarded $199 million for the Rural Health Transformation Program. WVU Medicine and Health Sciences will be involved in some of those initiatives. and that money will flow to the state, and the legislature will have to appropriate it. So that will probably receive some significant attention as that money comes in. I think one of the things that I always like to stress to you, and I say this to faculty and staff, we're not just advocates for the university leadership, we're also here to help you. So if you have specific questions about bills being introduced, about the process or procedure, all those things can seem very confusing for someone outside looking in. So please use this as a resource. We work closely with Jason, and he works closly with us as well. So you can reach out to me, you can reach out to Jason, just email me, text me, or call me. I'm a geriatric millennial. I'll talk on the phone if you want to talk. So please use us as a resource. And as Jason said, I'd be happy to come back in February and give you a more detailed update of what's happening during the session. So that's my report. Any questions?
Thanks for your time, Travis. Joe Jones, College of Creative Arts and Media, fellow elder millennial. So I don't know how to ask this. I'm kind of ignorant. I've only been here for 4 or 5 years. Does the legislator seem open to us as a public good for the state? Or is it kind of what I'm seeing on this national level where we are all seen as like, I don't know, leftist radicals, and they don't really want to fund us for stuff? Like, where does this kind of current legislator sit in your mind as far as that kind of dynamic?
Well, that's certainly a first question to take. I do think, let's just be honest. I do think that there are elements of the latter point of your question that you can look at floor speeches or comments and obviously see that. I think if you go back these past 5 years, you will see that the state has increased investment in higher education. That's just a fact. They've provided more money for deferred maintenance. They've increased the line items slightly. You know, you go back to 2012, higher education was cut, and WVU in particular received about a $40 million reduction from 2012 to 2017. Now, that was because the state was dealing with a pretty significant economic decline. And so state revenues declined. And one of the easiest places, unfortunately, for the state to cut, because so much of the funding on the state level is tied to federal funds rolling in for Medicare and Medicaid and those other areas, and public education. One of the only areas of a big pot of money that they have to cut is higher education. So we did see a decline until 2018. Then we started to see an increase. So where we were reduced by about $40 million, if you look at fiscal year 2013 compared to fiscal year now, we're only down about $13 million. Now, with inflation, that purchasing power is completely different, right? But they have invested in programs and higher education in the past 5 years. It hasn't been at the rate that we would hope, but it certainly has been an increase, and we're thankful for that.
Yeah, and the people I've talked to who work at the legislature, basically the idea is, yes, there's this kind of federal conversation of what academia is. But when you get some of these people in the room, there is a willingness to listen. And it sounds like that there is a willingness to listen. That gives me
absolutely
somewhat of a...
I think so many of them have a lot of pride in the university, you know, and that's part of our strategy, is reminding them that students come from all 55 counties. Many of the faculty come from all 55 counties. There's an impact on their local level, and that's how we try to talk to them. You know, if one of them starts talking about, you know, whatever university or whatever faculty member, you know, we just move on to, but look what we're doing in your community. Look what we're doing for the citizens of the state. And that usually cuts through that rhetoric.
Right. Yes, thank you.
I don't mean to cut off my colleague Travis, but Paul reminded me, I got a text shortly after the news came out about Beverly from the Speaker of the House. And he said, congratulations on a terrific hire. What a wonderful addition to your team. So I told Beverly about that. And then he responded a few minutes later. I said, thank you. Would she like to come and be on the floor of the House on Wednesday? So she is joining us on Wednesday. she texted me over the weekend and said, I have downloaded Speaker Hanshaw's PhD dissertation from Notre Dame in chemistry. She's a biologist. And she said, we will have overarching or overlapping rather scientific interests that I plan to discuss at our meeting. So she's already gotten started, and it's clear they pay attention to what's going on here. And I can't say enough good about our team. They know them. They know, one thing we're going to try to do with this time in our presentation is take specific examples of students from their respective counties and say, you may not think that down in wherever, whatever county, Logan County, this is so-and-so from this high school, and this is what they're doing at WU. And it makes it real. The stories are powerful, and they make that connection to the university. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you, Paul.
President Benson, this might be relevant to you. You can stay around here. Megan, like Creative Arts, oh gosh, what is our college? College of Creative Arts and Media. I wondered if we can get an update on kind of, our push for more students in the state is obviously really important, and yet public school is declining in terms of enrollment. And for me, the concern has been the Hope Scholarship taking away from public education dollars and putting them toward charter schools and different types of initiatives. And I don't know if this is something we're getting, but is there a report on how many of those Hope Scholarship recipients end up going into higher education? Are we going to get anything like that? Or is that something we can ask for this legislative session?
Yeah, I turned to Travis, and we both agree. We don't know if there is, but we'll find out.
Yeah, it just might be something
Yeah.
for Higher Ed Policy Commission, something
Yeah.
to kind of look at. What's the good that this is doing for the state? And frankly, if we're facing shortfalls for that budget, what are things that need to be put into place, like salary caps for people who are eligible for Hope Scholarships? I'm hearing a lot of concerns about, frankly, very wealthy families using that money and funding kind of private school initiatives that don't need it. And I have a lot of friends who are in K through 12 programs, and they're just, school consolidation continues to happen, and children are on buses for over an hour. It just worries me, I think, in the kind of future of where are we recruiting students from and how prepared are they? So
I came from to this meeting from a Zoom with John Chambers. John continues to stay very close with his alma mater, and shared with him the number of high school graduates that we produce in the state. He was shocked to hear it was so low, and I said, that is actually a little blip on the radar. That's a high water mark, and it's going to continue to regress in the future. You've heard Foz talk about we want to win West Virginia. So that share of students that choose to do something beyond high school, we want them to choose us, and we're trying very hard to recruit them. The challenge, as you know, is that we have the highest high school graduation rate in the United States, and then we plummet to 48% in terms of post-high school participation. So go get a trade, get a diploma, a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree. That is the message that we're saying to high school kids. We want you to choose WVU, but you've got to do something.
yeah. And it sounds like, I just heard from Curtis Capehart, the director of policy at in the governor's office, and they're worried about workforce development. Certainly, the West Virginia has the lowest rate of workforce involvement, I think, in the United States, which is kind of shocking. And so I think just all of those initiatives feel like important for our future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. Okay, I've heard from a number of you all that you're interested in knowing how First Day Complete is going. So we now have Associate Vice President Aaron Newmeyer.
All right. Well, I think I stand between you and the door. So I have a very brief slide presentation. First, I want to thank the Senate Chairman for having me today. I also want to thank you all for being here. I know it's the first day of classes and you guys have a lot on your plates. Busy time of year, which is that way throughout the entire semester, but very much appreciate your time and attention. So this is the second academic year that we've had First Day Complete with it's a partnership with WVU's Bookstore, which is a partnership with Barnes & Noble. Before I get into the details of this presentation, I always like to start with a caveat. This is one tool in the toolbox. This is not the answer for every student on our campus. And so what I want to say to you up front is we continue to message and educate our students and our parents. We have also expanded some of that education into the faculty and the department chairs. We want students to make an informed decision. It might be right for them one semester and not the next, but every student needs to make an informed financial decision, and we ask that they do that with their family, their peers, their respective faculty leaders, if that makes the most sense for them. So just a reminder what this program is and what it is not. So it is a undergraduate student textbook program and course material program. It is a flat fee program. Students are automatically enrolled into the program, undergraduate students only. The goal is to give students or provide students a lower cost, lower stress approach to obtaining their textbooks, and so that everything is packaged and ready for them on the very first day of class, hence the name First Day Complete. It does include their traditional textbooks, digital or physical, other course materials, including lab manuals, access codes, and then they are provided on a rental basis, which helps us keep the costs low for our students. As I mentioned, the students are automatically enrolled into First Day Complete. They are, however, able to opt out. The communication leading up to the start of the semester and even the first week or so of classes is pretty robust. They are very well aware that that is an option available to them, just as it is the opt-out program for our student health insurance program. Additionally, we have increased our communications and education with feedback from students, faculty, and their parents, just to make sure that everybody understands what the program is and what it is not. The hope, though, is that they find value in it, and if they do, they remain opt-in. So for our WVU students who participated in academic year 24-25, they saved just under $2 million by participating in this program. So again, that flat rate fee. So if you look at some of our HSC students who their textbooks, their course materials are a couple $100, $500, $600, the flat fee is absolutely a no-brainer for them. It might not make sense for some of our Eberly students. So again, it is on a student-by-student basis on whether or not this is beneficial and financially makes sense for them. However, what I will say is in order for us to provide this program successfully, we need your help. And so I think the last time I was here was in the spring. We talked about faculty adoptions and how important and pivotal that is to the process. They are a critical component so that we know what materials we need to order, have readily available and on the shelves, packaged and ready for our students come day one of both fall and spring semester. The only materials that are provided are those that you deem required. So if there are other alternative or optional materials or supplemental materials, they're not included. And then what I'll add is that the on-time adoptions are critically important. Again, so Barnes & Noble has applicable time to source those materials, make sure that we have everything readily available for your students, so that there's not a backlog in your teaching and your course programming throughout the start of the semester. I will add just a couple caveats. I think a lot of faculty assume if they're readopting the same materials that they don't necessarily need to go into the system each semester and tell us you're doing so, but we do need you to do that. In addition to that, it's obvious if you're making a change, we need you to tell us. But also, if you're not using course materials, it helps significantly if you go into that system and tell us. Then we won't bother you with follow-up emails and reminders. We'll also know, and we can mark that on our list, that there won't be materials assigned to that course, and your students will then know as we communicate. They're not
If we
looking
can
for,
also, because I need to go get,
they're not looking for
get us,
materials for that course as well. Additionally, we talked last time I was here about the adoption of digital course materials and how that could potentially help lower the cost of students' materials. So what I will say is the other caveat to that is old editions and out-of-print textbooks. So now that we're 3 semesters into this program, I think there might have been some faculty who had used some out-of-edition prints. They aren't always easy for us to get our hands on. And so what I will say is there might look like there are materials available on Amazon or other sources, but there might not be enough for Barnes and Noble to procure or that are within circulation for us to get for the entirety of the students in those courses. So it used to be kind of cost prohibitive to adopt the newer model with First Day Complete because of the flat fee and because the rental program, it's not. I know that that does put additional work on faculty to have to go in and update your course material for a newer edition textbook, but it does provide an opportunity for students, 1, to have newer course material, and 2, for us to make sure that there is ample supply readily available for our students that are in the program. There have been some communications through the course of the semester and over the last year with those faculty that are using some out-of-date or older edition textbooks. We're going to continue to work with those folks and individuals, or as we've identified them, to kind of update materials if the faculty so chooses. But it is a work in progress, and happy to work with you all if we can help source materials. Additionally, what I will say is we're here to help. This is a partnership. And so John Chomp is with me here today from Barnes and Noble. We have a really robust team at the bookstore. Amanda Johnson has been our point of contact for years. If you have any question about your course material, about somebody in your department that can't find something, access, students aren't getting what they need, we are here to help. That's the goal. So this isn't intended to create chaos for students, faculty, or anybody else on campus. It's, again, another tool in the toolbox, hoping to lower the cost of attendance for our students. Again, if it makes financial sense for them, but also to make the process seamless and smooth so that as you guys have put so much work into your syllabi and the course, that they are ready and able to learn on day 1 with all the materials that you have deemed required for them. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hi, Brian Powell from Statler College. Have there been any efforts from the university and to try to drive Barnes and Noble to improve communication with faculty? This has been an ongoing issue. I'm still seeing it. I had a case today where I had submitted materials for a course for digital content. I had requested in previous semesters that it be digitally delivered. It never was. There was never communication from them. All of a sudden, I have students saying when they go and look on Barnes and Noble that it's saying that it's being delivered through eCampus. When they go into eCampus, it's not there. Now, I will admit that today I did email and get a quick response, much faster than I have in the past, indicating that they would be available in 24 to 48 hours. But I have students asking me in class, and I have no idea what's going on. That lack of communication has been an ongoing problem.
Yeah. I will say first and foremost that Barnes and Noble has been a pretty good partner with us in helping us kind of streamline communications. I don't think first semester we knew what we were getting ourselves into, and that was a learning curve for us, right? And so if you look at the robust communications that have been pushed out over the course of the last 6 to 9 months, I will say it is hopefully improving. I will say the Barnes and Noble team also, instead of communicating broadly via email, have done some things in the colleges in particular. So Amanda and her team have set up shops or Q&A tabling events within the colleges to try and address some of those questions and be readily available to faculty. I would love to look into your situation particularly, Brian, or specifically. So if you would connect with me afterwards, then maybe we can chat about it and anecdotally figure out exactly what's going on.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Hi,
Hi,
Aaron. Matt Valenti, also from Statler College, Brian's department. I wanted to just ask you about like the university's position on textbook affordability in general, because if we go back 5 years, I've been in the Senate for a while. We talked a lot about textbook affordability. I think we even developed a Board of Governors rule where faculty were asked to try to reduce the cost of materials. And you made a comment that, well, maybe we don't need to do that anymore. Maybe we should try to get the new book. And so I was just wondering, should we be looking at the cost of a textbook as a criterion, or is at this point, it doesn't matter?
So I think what I will say is, in general, for this institution, cost of attendance is always top of mind, right? And so when we looked at the First Day Complete program, that was one of them. I will also say that Barnes and Noble, with increased participation rates and higher digital adoption rates for course material last year, reduced the cost and the burden to our students. I'm hoping to have that conversation again with them for the next academic year. What I will say is, because it is a flat rate fee and it is a rental textbook program, that price individually per the material doesn't matter as much, Matt. And so when I was talking about my comment about the newer editions, the newer prints, yes, previously they might have been more costly for a student to go and buy that off the shelf. Now that it's bundled as part of First Day Complete, and because it is a rental, it isn't as cost prohibitive to that student. In addition, a newer edition that we can find ample supply for that entire course or section is actually cheaper than trying to go out and source materials that are out of print or out of circulation. That a lot of times will drive up the cost, and we have a hard time meeting the demand. So it is a bit of a balance.
Hi there, Catherine Fonseca, WVU Libraries. Just a follow up to that I guess your response presumes that the student opts in and doesn't opt out, right?
Mhm.
And so it would still be more costly for the student that opts out in that sort of scenario, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair assessment. That's a fair point. However, if the student opts out and if we're having a hard time sourcing the materials for old and out of date course materials, I would assume that they would likely have that same trouble. And it might be a higher rate if they were buying it on the open market.
Sure, or faculty member could use course reserves, right, at the library. There's other systems.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I always preface this is one tool in the toolbox. I mean, we've talked about OER and, there are lots of options available to students, and would encourage faculty to consider all options. I mean, there are some faculty that don't adopt course materials or they use OER, and that's great. It should be a combination. We need to make sure that we are considering all of the available materials for our students.
So that's not even my question. My question is, I've asked in the last presentation that you made if there was any efforts to make a third-party audit on the cost savings that Barnes & Noble reports, because they're calculating based on retail price and usually digital retail price, right? The higher price point. So thinking about, the ways that students work around, use materials, things like that, trying to arrive at a true cost of savings to know if this contract is truly beneficial to students. Any progress on that?
So we have not exercised what I would say a sanctioned official independent audit. What we have done is pulled several student schedules, shopped open market in comparison to what the flat fee would be. I will say, and again, it's one tool in the toolbox. There are some students that it makes more sense for them to procure their materials elsewhere. It does not justify the flat rate fee. But that is on each individual student to make an informed financial decision. And the communications that we've started sending out in the last 2 semesters have had an increased emphasis upfront on how to better educate yourself on the process, the tools available that cost to you within the program, and how to compare that outside of the program.
Does this program apply to professional students? Are they enrolled into the program? For example, pharmacy, medicine, law. School of Pharmacy has, I'm with the School of Pharmacy. School of Pharmacy has already has a program that allows pharmacy students access textbooks. But of course, it may not necessarily be every resource. And of course, there are also other professional programs that are not technically not undergraduate programs, but of course have educational needs that are similar to undergraduate programs.
Currently, the program is undergraduate students. I will say we did have some preliminary conversations with some of the professional programs as to whether or not it made sense for them. At this point, John, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any of them have opted into the program. Nursing did participate in their 5-year program. Also, they found it significantly beneficial, so they did participate. But Evan, I'm also looking at you. I think after initial conversations, the professional programs did not opt in originally. Is that accurate? Yeah, except for nursing. Yeah, thank you.
Megan, like College of Creative Arts and Media, third time's charm here. I just wondered, what is our overall adoption rate for First Day Complete for opting in?
So I think I lost my slide. So it varies by semester, and I think some semesters it makes more sense for students than others. I think we have historically seen a higher adoption rate in the fall than the spring. Our current adoption rate, as of this morning, which I think has since changed, so I'll look to John, or actually I should say our opt-out percentage for this spring semester was 33%. John, do you have an update on the? Hold on.
Okay. Opting out. Okay, and for everyone who needs to know it, the opt-out deadline is Wednesday, January 21st, correct?
And I will say there are multiple communications to both students and parents between now and then, making them very aware of that opt-out date.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Miriam Leary School of Medicine. I'm wondering, compared to our peer institutions, are most institutions doing this with their bookstore? Yes. And then the rate that is set for the full-time versus part-time students, is that a national or is that just for WVU? And how do we land on that each year?
Yep. So what I will say is in our research, before we move down this path, yes, this is where most institutions are. I converse pretty regularly with my peer group in the Big 12. All but one school in the Big 12 is in a very similar program to ours. Different providers, not always with Barnes & Noble, but this is kind of the industry trend that they're moving in. It is a price that is specific to WVU. There is a model that Barnes & Noble puts together, and I will let John, if you want to come up to the microphone and kind of answer that. And what I will say is in polling my peer institutions, that is what has helped us work with Barnes & Noble to drive down the cost, right? And there are lots of levers that trigger that, the amount of digital material that are adopted versus traditional course books or textbooks, how many lab guides and kind of single-use products there are as well. But John can speak specifically to the Barnes & Noble process and how they really determine that cost.
Yeah, so it is specific to the content that's used at WVU. So we look at the prior year, we look at fall and summer, all the materials that are adopted, pricing for that. And then we kind of run it through our own internal price to get a per credit hour price. And then since we're doing a flat fee here, we multiply that out by an average number of credit hours for students, and that's what gets supplied. And then we do review that basically in the spring after we complete an academic year, adding in new factors like how many people opted out, who participated. You mentioned digital, shifts to digital, things like that. And then we kind of come up with the new price, and that's why we were able to lower it from year 1 to year 2. And then we'll kind of go through that same process again this year. So it will be based on WVU content.
Can you tell us, based on our peer institutions, maybe in the Big 12, are we higher or lower than average?
So we, in fact, are higher, which is what one thing I do not love. And so John and I and the team at Barnes & Noble have had this conversation each semester. What I will say is our participation rate is way lower than our peer institutions. And so a higher participation rate also drives down the cost, right? It's like that shared insurance model. So some of our peer institutions are in the 90-95% opt-in rate, remain opt-in. I will also say traditionally we have used less digital materials on our campus. And so the last time I was here and presented, we had that conversation about that is another tool in the toolbox. It is obviously up to faculty on what type of materials they want to adopt. That is at your discretion, but it does help us drive down the cost. And then the amount of consumables increases the cost as well. And so we had a slightly higher rate. So like I said, there are a lot of levers. We are a bit higher. Although because our participation rate has been going up, and the increase of adoption in digital materials has also been going up, we have been fortunate that Barnes & Noble was willing to share that cost savings with us, and in turn, not with us as an institution, but directly translate that or pass that back to our students.
So there are other providers. Did we shop around, or because we were already with Barnes and Noble?
So we had done an RFP for the bookstore contract and kind of shopped around that model. This is a newer contract with Barnes & Noble. I believe we're in year 2. Yeah. So there was a competitive RFP that went out.
Thank you.
Yep.
Brian Powell, Statler College again. My understanding right now is that first day complete's only being offered during the fall and spring semesters. Are there any plans to make it available during the summer?
I think that that is an option that is absolutely on the table. We really felt like we needed to, after the first academic year, needed to make some adjustments and improve the process. And I think we're working on that. So wanted to make sure that we had fall and spring well under control before we added in the complexity of summer. If you guys think about this process, and you guys know this better than anybody, by the time you adopt your course material for the fall semester and we get students on campus, we're starting to contact you and talk about the spring semester. So you add summer into that mix and it becomes a really tight turn. So we wanted to make sure that we were adequately prepared to adopt summer before going down that path. But the option is on the table when we feel like we're ready institutionally.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Good. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron. And if I'm allowed to, since I'm chair of this, editorialize for 1 second, I think we've all seen how committed our faculty is to an affordable education, including how we assign books and whatnot. That is the last of the guest reports. Is there any new business today? All right, then. We've reached the end of the agenda. We are adjourned. Have a great first week.
Okay, it says 8 to 6.